Bullets hammered the cabin's wooden walls, and smoke clawed at Silas's lungs. He cradled the wounded princess in his arms, grit clinging to every breath, exactly how he'd sworn he'd never have to fight again. He coughed as acrid gunpowder stung his throat, the harsh tang of metal and flames reminding him of promises already broken. Outside, a half-dozen cavalrymen took aim at the shattered door. 48 hours earlier, Silas rode into Black Pine Gulch, seeking the peace he'd lost. The storm on the horizon promised only thunder and fire. Silas reined his horse to a stop at the edge of Black Pine Gulch, dust swirling in the afternoon heat. Quiet was all he had left of his old life. But even in this small western town, the calm felt uneasy. A strangled cry echoed from a shuttered alley. Silas sprang toward it, heart racing. A young Comanche girl leaned against a splintered railing, an arrow embedded in her shoulder. 2 cavalry scouts blocked her path, rifles trained on her chest. "Stay back!" Silas roared, stepping into the line of fire. The girl's dark eyes blazed through tears of pain. Any hesitation would mean her death. Silas gritted his teeth and drew his Colt. He had sworn to himself he'd never shoot again, but adrenaline erased that vow in a heartbeat. The girl gasped and exhaled a ragged breath. Blood stained her cheek and sank into the dirt. He felt her pulse slow beneath his fingers, felt life returning. Silas lifted her chin gently and noticed the small silver medallion resting on her chest. "What is this?" he asked quietly. She brushed her hand across the pendant. "It was my mother's token," she whispered. "Keeps me safe." Silas nodded and slipped the necklace under his jacket, hoping it might bring her luck. Silas helped her onto his horse and held her steady as he remounted. Behind them, the town clock struck 5 and daylight began to fade. Thunder rumbled over the distant ridge. A sharp scent of rain and pine filled the air. He kicked his mare into a gallop, racing toward dusk before anyone could find them. He knew the cavalry would not give up the chase. Could they reach any shelter before the cavalry caught up with them? Subscribe now to follow his desperate fight against time. Silas ducked inside an old mission church on the outskirts of town, the smell of burning candles and sweat hanging heavy in the air. Reverend John, an old friend, rushed to fetch water and bandages. He glared at Silas's Colt, but said nothing. Candles flickered as John cleaned the arrow wound. "She's a princess of the Comanche," Silas explained quietly, avoiding the man's eyes. John paused, concern in his craggy face. "You harbor an enemy among us," he muttered under his breath. "I'm just tending a life, friend," Silas replied, voice tight. "But the cavalry will see it differently." Outside, anxious voices rose as a small posse formed to search the area. "Men gather in the square," John said. "They think we're traitors to the Union cause." A sharp knock came at the church door. "Cavalrymen," Silas said, tense. Through a window, he spotted a familiar face. Corporal Drake, the brutal cavalry scout he'd tangled with long ago. "They'll want her turned over," John warned. "They're expecting fireworks." Silas tucked the girl's arm around his neck and met Drake's cold gaze through the cracked door. "We come for the prisoner," Drake snarled. "Time's short. Colonel Hansen has set artillery for dawn tomorrow," one trooper barked. Silas felt the weight of hours press on him like a stone. "You hide your whiskered son or your wife. I give no quarter," Drake spat. Silas's eyes hardened. He glanced at the tarnished pocket watch in his hand, its face dulled by dust. Twilight deepened outside as he wiped the glass crystal with his sleeve. The hands ticked on the last 2 revolutions. "We owe her some mercy," Silas called out softly. "Mercy." Drake laughed. "You feel sorry for a squaw." "This is more than hatred. It's cowardice," Silas growled. "Face it, you lost your war, and now you face a reckoning." "Open that door," a soldier barked. Silas shook, mind racing. "How can I save her?" he thought. As distant thunder cut through the night, rain shattered the church windows, spilling moonlight across the wooden pews. Silas fired blindly into the storm, each shot cracking through the chapel like thunder. Wood splintered as bullets pinged off the walls. He crouched low, spray of rain washing over his shoulders. The musky scent of wet pine and gunpowder filled his nostrils. "Protect the girl," he roared. Silas bolted the heavy door, the sound of hooves thundering on the stone floor. "I'll hold them off," he muttered. He raised his Colt and fired a warning round into the air. Outside, trees splintered in another volley of gunfire. Reverend John shouted for cover, pulling the princess behind the altar. Wind howled through the rafters as bolts of lightning cut the sky. "Stay down," Silas cried to John. In one flash, Silas saw something in the doorway, a rifle barrel aiming at the old man. He twisted. John fell as a bullet tore through the preacher's chest. "Father!" Silas cried. Hot blood soaked his fingers as he fell to his knees. Silas gently closed John's eyes and sat back in the fallen pew. Anger and grief battled in his chest. He wrapped the wounded man in his coat, ignoring the burning pain in his leg. "I've got only hours, Padre," he whispered, voice raw. John coughed, then managed a weak smile. "You keep your promise," he said faintly, and slipped into darkness. Rain hammered the roof as Silas cradled his fallen friend. The cold night threatened to take John's light away. Silas knew dawn would bring the cavalry's final charge. Could dawn break with John alive, or with the cavalry army at their doorstep? Dawn spilled gold across the charred pews as Silas woke on the cold floor. He sat up and unlatched the old silver pocket watch from his vest. The hands glinted in the morning light. About 15 hours remained until dawn. Aiyana stirred, brushing back a strand of dark hair from her face. "Why did you help me?" she asked, voice small. "Because I couldn't just leave someone to die out here," Silas answered softly. He offered a thin smile. "My name is Silas. Now I know yours." "Aiyana," she said, touching the silver medallion at her throat. "I am a Comanche princess. Last night, the cavalry burned our village. They think I was kidnapped by an outlaw. They've declared war on us to find me." Silas closed his eyes briefly, remembering John. "I swore I'd never kill again," he said quietly. "But I lied. I killed a man who was no different from me. I had to do it. I did it to keep you alive." He opened his fist and revealed the small silver cross John had pressed there. Silas rubbed the chill from his hands and reached for Aiyana's hand. Their fingers brushed, and in that touch, a silent understanding passed between them. He remembered the hollow eyes of men he'd once killed, the taste of gunpowder and guilt on his tongue. They held each other's gaze in silence for a long moment as distant shots died away. "Your pain is my pain," Aiyana whispered. She moved closer, eyes steady. "We carry our people's hopes now," she added. "We will face this together." He gave her a small nod, understanding binding them. "We have 15 hours to stop them," Aiyana said, voice steady, "or die trying." Midday thunder rolled as Silas and Aiyana rode through the tall grass toward the ridge. Colonel Hansen's scouts waited ahead. "They'll ambush us," Silas muttered under his breath. He reined in the horse. Dust boiled in the distance as horses crested the hill. "Stay low," Silas hissed. 4 dozen men with rifles and sabers came charging down the slope. Silas ducked into a ravine, pulling Aiyana behind him. He coughed as gunpowder and dust filled his nostrils. He opened fire into the dust cloud, and the ground shook. A man screamed as a bullet found his shoulder. His rifle clattered to the earth. "Draw back, savage!" yelled Drake, standing on the hillside. Silas clenched his teeth and shielded Aiyana with his body. "No more shooting innocents!" he roared, spraying bullets at the rock face. It barked. Drake crumpled to the ground, one hand pressed to his wound. "Mercy! Mercy!" he gasped. Silas stood tall over him, eyes glinting. "Maybe next time," he said, voice steady. A single shot cracked into the earth at Drake's feet. The cavalry wheeled and fled. When the echoes faded, Silas wiped sweat from his brow. The sky churned with dark clouds and lightning crackled on the horizon. In the distance, a booming sound grew louder. The artillery had arrived. Silas checked on Aiyana, dusting smudges from her face. "We need to move," he whispered urgently, helping her back into the saddle. He urged the mare forward as the ridge behind them glimmered with tracer fire. Silas and Aiyana set up camp in a lonely meadow as dawn's first light spread across the fields. Silas winced from the night's aches. John's silver cross felt heavy against his chest. The air smelled of damp grass and pine sap. Through the quiet morning, Silas saw movement in the tree line. Jack Rawlins emerged from the shadows, once Silas's brother-in-arms, now a wanted man and county sheriff. His jaw was clenched and eyes hard. "You shouldn't have shown mercy, old friend," Rawlins spat, voice tight. "I gave you a second chance. Friends don't betray friends." Silas ran a hand across his face. "Jack," he whispered, voice gentle. "I couldn't watch John die. I wouldn't do it again, not for anyone." Rawlins's face twisted. "He was my son," he snarled, spit flying. "You spared a killer and left me a widow." Aiyana stepped back as anger and pain warred in Jack's eyes. Lightning flickered overhead as Rawlins drew his revolver. A shot cracked. Silas dove behind a log. "Drop it!" Silas shouted. Aiyana sprang up and knocked Rawlins's pistol aside. The gun clattered across the rocks. "Do your worst, Silas," Rawlins hissed. "He had a name, you know." Silas stepped forward, Colt lowered but ready. "I know," he said quietly. "His name was John." He watched Rawlins's shoulders slump. Rawlins sank to his knees, tears in his eyes. For a long moment, neither man moved. Then Silas holstered his gun. "Mercy was his wish," Silas murmured. "Go be the man you were meant to be." Rawlins did not argue. He ran into the breaking dawn. Silas felt empty. He had saved his friend, but at what cost to his own soul? Subscribe now to witness his final choice. Silas snapped his tarnished pocket watch shut and led the princess to safety as dawn broke. Mercy had saved a life, but Silas's soul bore the cost.